Hi, I'm Rochelle. Welcome to my vlog, Get Woke, because it's hot. It's ridiculous, I know, but I love it. So we start each segment doing just that, okay? We just soften all the space around our eyes and our eyebrows, relax our jaw, take a couple deep breaths, filling yourself up with this moment. This breath, this moment will never happen again. See if you can infuse it with a little more joy and enjoy this breath a little bit more, holding on to it a little bit longer, letting everything soften on the exhale. And then if you have a way to look at your face, just notice how much better you look now. And if you can't seem to want to be connected and present for the right reasons today, just do it because you look better when you do it. And then start to notice how much better you feel. Chevy's feeling good. All right, now that we're all woke and shit, just want to talk about the way I've been seeing this whole duality, or this battle of good and evil. It seems so obvious. I'm sure many people have thought of it before, but it's just seeming really like starkly, I don't know, words are weird. Anyways, I'm just seeing it like, instead of good and bad or light and dark, it's just conscious versus unconscious, obviously, right? So our mind is split. You can call it good and evil if you want. I definitely see where that's all coming from, and it makes a certain amount of sense. But to me, it's more useful not to think of either side as bad, because they're both necessary. And finding this balance between the two energies, instead of thinking that one is right and one is wrong, is what's going to help us have this little cosmic interplay of two energies, instead of this pendulum swinging abruptly, hitting one hard and then going too far off the rails. So instead of looking outward at all the things that are wrong in the world and all the things I could go potentially help fix, I just keep looking inward and seeing how we have this reptilian part of our brain that's literally part of our brain that's still just like the reptile, that just doesn't want you to die. That's his only objective. Don't die. So he's constantly on your shoulder, alerting you of every little potential danger that could be a snake in the grass. And then he does all these things that he thinks are helpful. Sending blood to your feet in case you need to run for your life, sending adrenaline through your body. And these things are really helpful if there is in fact a tiger chasing you. Super helpful. However, if you're talking to like somebody you love, and so, okay, the reptilian voice creates this whole persona, this whole identity. This whole body identity is essentially tied into that little voice. And when you're just talking to somebody you love and your ego gets his little feelers hurt, it doesn't know the difference between like a tiger chasing you or just little wounded ego. So it does the thing, adrenaline, blood in the feet, and now you wonder why you're standing here wanting to, you found a ball? You're incredible, come here. Why you're wondering why you want to like punch somebody in the face, and where you're like, oh, you're hot and you're mad and you can't even access the rational part of your brain once this happens. And so in that moment, you're losing this battle. If you want to call it good and evil, but it's just conscious versus unconscious, because you're letting this reptilian voice that isn't bad, he just is really devoted. Don't die, don't die, don't die, right? Because if that's all he has is this body, and when that's gone, he's gone, because he's not this interconnected being to all that is. So that's the other voice, consciousness, that would tell us that we are way more than just this body, that we are in fact connected. We're this energy that doesn't just stop where our body stops, that we're this infinite, eternal energy. And even science backs that up, for those of you that need it to pencil out, because energy never dies, it just changes form. So we're this energy moving. We don't really know what happens when our body stops, you know. We know the lizard brain is probably gone, right? And now we're probably free to be in that place of oneness without any limitations. But while we're here, we're kind of stuck in this battle, or duality, if you will. And so what I've been noticing is just every time that I can override that little reptilian voice, unless there's a threat, you're about to wreck the car, and then you're like really grateful for all of its little things it does, reallocating your resources to stay alive. It's great. But if I'm just talking to somebody I love and I feel like maybe there's a little bit of fear or something starting to creep in, I get to choose to take that deep breath and soften my face. And just by doing that, you bring the awareness into the frontal lobe of your brain, the part that can think rationally, that can access this other part of us that is way beyond words. And then you're winning your battle in this moment. And then I start to realize that when you encounter someone else that's losing their battle in the moment, that for some reason, the first thing we want to do, we still think we're fighting the good fight. And we're trying to be on the right side of things, or on the side of good or God. And so when they're behaving poorly, we think that it's appropriate to tell them so, and tell them all the ways they're not showing up properly in the world, in this very moment, right? Because we want to be good or right or righteous. But unless you want to be helping them lose their battle of good and evil in this moment, then that's not really going to be helpful. What's going to be helpful is giving them a little bit of love, forgiveness, grace. And if we do, then there is redemption. And by giving it, now do we know that it is, that it's available to us, and that we have it to give. Because in that place of consciousness where we are everything, that's how you would know you have something. You give it away. In this world, the lizard brain world, it would tell you if you give something away, now you don't have it, because it lives in this finite place of time and space where there are limitations, and that would be true. You know, if I gave you my shoe, I wouldn't have a shoe anymore. But the essence of what I really am, since it's more like an idea, like God or love. So if you share an idea with somebody, the idea gets bigger and bigger. It doesn't, now it's not gone. And you can contradict that, because you can contradict anything in duality. And you could say, someone can steal your idea. You tell them the idea, and then they go make a product and make some money, and then they get the money and you don't. That's lizard brain. And yes, they're not wrong. They're just coming from that other place. So essentially the lizard, like the devil and angel on your shoulder, is just a lizard, and then the truth, right? And so lizard brain is always basically in fear of death. And so it's fear and love here at war. But the good news is that fear doesn't really exist, because as soon as you show up with love or make that conscious override, it's gone. Unless the adrenaline's already surging and whatnot, then a little time has to pass before you can cool back down. But in that regard, it's interesting, because it's the same as light and dark. Like, dark doesn't really exist, right? Once the light comes, where's the dark now? It doesn't really exist. It's just the lack of light, and the fear is the lack of love. So that thought kind of makes me feel better, because it's not just like this battle. It's just like this misperception, this fear. If we were in fact just a body, then we should be fearful all the time of the lurking threats, just like the animals in the forest are, right? But since we are so much more than that, I think what that conscious part is trying to get us to do is be like a little bit more like the tree in the forest. Like, he's so unattached to what part of the journey he's on. You know, he's this beautiful, grand thing on his own, but also part of something so much bigger. And he doesn't enjoy the youthful parts more than the wilted moments before death. And he doesn't, you know, maybe you'll say, because you want to contradict everything, well, he doesn't think, he doesn't know. And it's like, okay, maybe, but just metaphorically then. So this tree, you know, it doesn't worry about its own death, because it doesn't see it that way. Yes, it will get scattered into pieces on the forest floor, and then it'll get to go and become new life forms that it could never even imagined, supposing it could even imagine. And I think that's what that conscious voice is trying to get us to do. I think essentially it's what Buddhism is trying to get us to do too, letting go of these attachments. Because everything we see here will return to the dust. But that's not bleak. We don't have to think about it like buried in the dirt with worms crawling through our eyes, because these particles in motion that are us and all these things we see have this energy that is that other thing, the truth about us, in them, and we don't really know what's going on or how they'll reassimilate. You know, I can imagine that it might be extreme liberation, you know, once this heart stops beating. Who knows? I don't also want to be excited about it, because I think even that can be missing this moment, you know. I know people that are like, I'm so excited about death, and I think that's just overcompensating so as to not have fear. So they know that having fear about it is bad, so then they think like being excited about it is good, because they think there's a good and bad. But Osho always says that hope is a drug, and I didn't get it at first because I was in that trap. Because like I know people that have like anxiety or fear about the future, and I imagine that doesn't feel good at all. And so I'm like, well, I would never do that. And I just jump to the other side of things, the place where I think is right. And I'm like, I'm very hopeful about the future. And now I just created a cozier trap for myself, because whereas at least the fear and anxiety is a catalyst to change because it doesn't feel good, now this hope for the future, you're holding out hope that some point in this imaginary future is going to be better than this moment right now. Like, what are the chances, right? And instead of just being here right now in this moment and letting this be enough, I'm holding on to this idea that this future moment is going to be better than this. And then I realized that it's like I've done that in a lot of ways. Like I saw a way of being that I thought was bad, so then I just do the opposite because that must be good, and then just create myself a cozier trap because now it feels good and I get to feel right or righteous. So now I could stay in that trap forever, whereas the other trap would at least go, oh, get out of here, I don't want to feel this way, right? So I've just been noticing that everything, like for some reason this example has felt really prevalent to me. Like you ask somebody if they have an open mind, and typically the first thing they do is kind of go through a list of things from their past. And usually they'll just look at the ways in which they've showed up open-mindedly, and then they'll come back with the answer, yes, I'm open-minded, and they'll have some proof or reasons why. And they'll conveniently overlook all of the times where they showed up not so open-mindedly. But if I can get them to go back and look at those as well, then they can see that they are not open-minded or closed-minded. That in fact they cannot be summed up by an idea or a concept, or especially by their past. That it's only in this moment, right now, you can decide if you want to open your mind, be here with me now, connected to all that is. The only time you can do that is when your mind is open. When you're listening to little reptile voice or that fear-based voice, he wants to just tell you about all your preconceived ideas or all the knowledge we have gained, because that's all going to help you to not die. And so it's all clouded. It's always just trying to figure out what's going on and piece it all together. So it's literally missing the magic of this moment. There's the parts we can't quite explain or see or touch. It totally blocks them all out with all of this constant chatter of trying to put everything in its box of right or wrong or good or bad. So everything is just like that. Like you can't say a thing is good or bad. Like people are like, sex is bad, right? Obviously that's not true. Obviously, yes, from that fear-based place of doing it for the wrong reasons can complicate or even ruin your life. But doing it from that connected, conscious place can be the most amazing and beautiful interactions we have with another. And drugs, right? Drugs are bad. It's like, well, yeah, drugs can ruin your life if used irresponsibly or from that fear-based place of trying to escape from the way that you feel right now. But, you know, when used appropriately as medicine, they're obviously very, very helpful and even instrumental for a lot of things here. So you can't look at anything and say it's good or bad, because it's only in this moment. Anything you do while you're listening to that fear-based, even just going to work, if you're essentially just going to work every day because you're scared of what will happen if you don't, your life is going to end up looking like something that feels depressing or produces anxiety or at least discontent. But if you're going to work every day because you're connected and conscious and want to, and it feels like you're making a difference, then your life is going to look a lot different. So in every moment we get to decide if we are winning that battle of good and evil or not. If we want to, since we can, and I think we're the only species that can, consciously override that fear-based voice that's just saying, don't die, don't die, don't die, whatever you do, as though that's any way to live. Like, I'd rather die than live in fear, gripped like the animal in the woods, right? I mean, maybe not. I'd probably fight. I don't know. We don't know anything. And that's what's so funny. Since we don't essentially know what we are or what's really going on here, we cannot be certain of anything. But if you looked at us, you would think we were very, very certain, fighting everybody and telling them what is right or wrong. And essentially, every time you're telling somebody that they're wrong and you're right, what you're telling them is that I am way more well put together than you. My lens I have crafted from my experience is way more clear than yours. You should come over here to my side and look through my lens and use it because it's more accurate. And instead of realizing that every person has a unique piece of this puzzle and a unique different perspective that together makes this whole, and by appreciating the opposition, that's how we lay down the fight, come more towards the center, and make progress. If we just keep fighting, like maybe you'll notice next time you get in an argument, if you can zoom out, you might notice you're arguing about the nature of reality. One person believes that man is good, and one person essentially doesn't. Or maybe you don't talk about such things like spiritual things, but it's kind of clear if one person believes that like life is just kind of a struggle and everything is essentially an obstacle and I need to tackle this day, and maybe they have a good attitude about it, but everything's just this challenge that they have to overcome, whereas the other person might look at it like everything's this blessing, and then everything they're going to see so differently that even if they're not trying to argue about the nature of reality, they are in every little thing. And I don't think any of us want to go around arguing about the nature of reality. Like sometimes late at night, debate, it's kind of fun. But for the most part, I don't think we want to just be like arguing about the shoe and realizing that it's just because we have different ideas about what we are or where this projection is coming from. And then sometimes you'll zoom out and you'll realize that what you're actually arguing about is who is more well put together. Because if you think you're right and they're wrong, that's the argument you're having. Who has a more clear lens? Who is clearly more fit to as doing the work as a human to reconcile their inner and outer world, right? Do we really want to argue with people about that? And then the third one that seems to be the most favorite argument is just semantics. If you can zoom out far enough, you might realize that you all think and feel mostly the same way. And you just like gave these words different values, and now you think you're saying something different. But if you can, it's not always helpful to like really examine every argument, but when you do, sometimes you're like, whoa, this is just semantics. I thought we had totally different views about this. And then, you zoom far enough out and it's all semantics. And then you zoom far enough out and there's no point in even having a conversation, right? Because there's no objective reality, and then there's nothing to talk about, no progress that can be made, no cooperation. And so instead of me thinking that I need to get my boyfriend to zoom out more because he'll get hyper-focused on one thing and not see the big picture, I am learning to appreciate the fact that as long as I have him, I won't get zoomed too far out to be relatable, because it's not always helpful. It's not always helpful to hear time isn't real. It's like, okay, it's true, but what do you do with that information, right? And what I've been trying to do with him is if he can also appreciate that I'm zoomed out and we can find a place in between, where not because he's right and I'm wrong, but because all either of us have is our limited little perspective. And if we trust each other and we see each other as equals because we believe all men are created equal, then we co-create this lens using both of our past experiences, thoughts, hopefully presence and connection, to craft this really unique, trippy lens where we can agree on where to zoom in for the majority of the time, and we don't want to be zoomed way out here where nothing matters, or zoomed way in here where we're just working on one thing and not seeing how it affects all of it. And so we go together, we go, okay, well, you're setting the boundary over here for how far out we can zoom. You're setting the boundary for how far in we can zoom. Can we agree about right here is where we want to zoom? Can we agree on this little bit of objective reality, right? Can we just call this apple an apple for a second? Can you not need to tell me that it's not really an apple and that it's just particles spinning through space? Because it's not really helpful. We just want to cut it and eat it. So can we just use our limited knowledge we have about it to do that? To be helpful, useful, to create nourishment for our body? Yes, I can do that. Yes, sometimes I do want to talk about it, zoom out and talk about it, but it's not always helpful. And finding this balance of appreciating the opposition. Like imagine if somebody on the right had this conversation with somebody on the left and said, okay, I see what you're trying to do. We all just want to reduce the suffering in our lives, the people we love, even the whole world, right? We just have really different ideas about how to go about it. Maybe sometimes the left gets super hyper-focused on an issue and wants to fix it, like saying, let's just get rid of poverty. And it's like, great idea, great thought, nice gesture, right? But without realizing all the implications that will happen then. What if, for all we know, since we know nothing, what if those hard times, or like having to meet your own basic needs for a certain amount of time is what activates the hero's journey, that essentially gives you access to the place that can now connect to those deeper parts of you. We don't know. So it's like a nice idea to cover everybody's basic needs. But what if now this group mentality or this identity politics or whatever, what if it somehow overrides what's happening here? What if the only way we can get out of this trap or this battle is by confronting the little lizard of our own and finding a way to get all of our own basic needs met and tell him, like, hey, I don't need you here anymore. What if, just hypothetically, we all get our basic needs met and then he still gets to be there all the time because we didn't do the 1, 2, 3 steps in this here magical dimension that needs to happen, or I don't know if there's any steps or anything, but we don't know. So we're like so laser focused on the fact that we're right and they're wrong that we won't just agree to disagree about the nature of reality, so we can come towards the center. You know, I have friends that call themselves progressive, but I'm like, out there on the fringe, man, you're not going to make anything happen. That's not progress. Like, the only way to make progress, like people say that our system is all messed up because nothing can ever happen, because you know, it just goes back and forth or whatever. People just overturn the ones from the other. And that's like, yeah, that's when it's the pendulum, when it's a fight. And then the pendulum gets hit too hard and it goes too far this way, too far this way. But if we can lay down that fight, because a lot of times that's exactly what the fight is. Like, we talk about personal responsibility, but depending on whether you believe there's a God or what you believe we are, we're not sure where that starts. And I think a lot of people think that man left to his own devices would just blow it all up. So they think that we need a church or an organization or even a government to tell us what to do, because they don't essentially believe that man is good. And we don't want to argue with them about that, whatever we believe, right? We just want to say, how far can we zoom in together that incorporates the fact that you might be right about that, we might be right about this, but can we just agree on this part of objective reality? Because right now people are waking up and they're realizing there is no objective reality, and that, you know, biology, psychology, physics, all of it, like, that it was a great tool to teach us about some things, but then it creates a container or a limitation. You know, like, physics really taught us a lot about how, like, molecules interact and behave, but then we realized that just upon observation, those laws can be malleable. So, like, consciousness trumps all. And then the physicists that realize that, they get to keep going and going, but the ones that are so stuck in, like, well, that defies the laws of physics, that's not possible, they're kind of stuck in that old paradigm now. And the same probably goes with biology, psychology, all of it, right? Like, biology helped us to understand what we were, but we're hopefully evolving and becoming conscious. So to just keep acting like we're still what we were might not be super helpful. You know, we don't want to be told that this is how it's always going to be. It almost is like any of those textbooks from the past should be looked at as history, even, you know, all the subjects, because that's how we were. And maybe it should always be being rewritten in every moment, because maybe it's no longer pertinent, because as you wake up and realize that you don't have to be put in a box, that you can be any gender you want or anything you want, then you're like, yeah, screw that. But does it need to be tossed all the way out? I don't know. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's still useful for some things, but maybe it needs tweaked. But I just think we need to be careful with thinking that we need to start from scratch. Like, I think that a lot of the people, you know, want to say, and they're not wrong, that a lot of what we have here was founded in white supremacy or racism because people that founded it had slaves. But I don't know if that's a fair way to look at it, because people in every part of the world had slaves. And I'm not saying that makes it right by any means. I'm just saying, I'm just so glad that we're not there anymore, that we've progressed so far. And I'm just saying that just because, you know, as a people, as a majority of people at that time believed that was okay, do we really need to act as though everything that they did was wrong? Or can we know that they had moments where they were listening to lizard brain, and moments when they were connected and trying to do the right thing, and that maybe our founding fathers weren't just white supremacist, racist, maybe they had some things figured out, and like all of us have the capacity to be either, call it good and evil if you want, or just conscious or unconscious. And so, because one side is so dead set that they're right, and that anybody that has done well for themselves in this system must have stolen it and it should be stolen back, I think that they want to burn it all down. And in that regard, you could look at the two energies is chaos and order. Neither one is good or bad. You can think that one is and one isn't if you want to, but too much chaos is anarchy and too much order is tyranny. So neither one, left to their own devices, wouldn't go completely off the rails. And that's the funny thing. People want to act like man left to his own devices would go off the rails, but it's only if he can't find this balance between the good and evil, or reptile, conscious and unconscious, right? Because if we can find this balance, so, okay, the left isn't wrong for thinking that we need some progress, right? Maybe there is some fundamental institutional, systemic racism still alive in these systems they're trying to uphold, because essentially the right usually is trying to kind of keep things the way they are, so that somebody doesn't come in and just like blow it all up, because they believe that some of the things that we've done are correct, and that certain people that are calling themselves progressives will just come in and tear it all down, even though it seems to be a better system than we've ever historically seen. And that doesn't mean it's even near perfect. It has so much work to do. But just to think that we could create something better, I mean, I would like to hope, that as we evolve and become more conscious, that we definitely can. I just don't think we need to start from scratch. But when you look at this example, it's interesting because, okay, if there is some fundamental or systemic racism happening, then the left wants a little bit of chaos, right? Because that's the only way to disrupt what already is, the only way to progress what you already have. If your system is faulty or built on a faulty foundation, then you need to shake it up a little bit. You need a little bit of chaos. So the left is asking for chaos right now, and it's probably necessary. But they get too locked in or hyper-focused or zoomed in, and they think we need to like burn it all down. It's like, because they just get so attached to proving that the other side's wrong or evil or bad, instead of realizing that every one of those people has the capacity to be both. And it's just in this moment that we can choose to win our battle. We can demonize institutions and say, oh, police are bad, instead of realizing, again, they're just people. And we don't even want to say people are bad, because they can be either in every moment. And you can damn well guarantee, if they're in a situation with the gun on them and entering dangerous situations every day, then their lizard brain is on hyper alert all the time. And maybe, just maybe, a lot of them are sacrificing a lot of their peace to create a little bit less chaos for us, to find this balance. And maybe some of them are completely ruled by that, and do, because of that, want to attack and lash out and don't want to reduce the suffering, because all of us have that capacity. And we can point fingers all day and act like somebody or something is good or bad. But what if we just come into this moment and decide to lay down the fight? What if we realize that just by accessing that part of ourselves that you can't touch or see or therefore prove, that then we're winning the battle, we're being the peace we want to see in the world. And now maybe we can offer it up when we see other people losing their battle. Just by softening your face and taking a deep breath, you're overriding that fear, that lizard brain. Anytime somebody is mad or angry or raising their voice or making a mean face at you, that's what's going on. There's a chance you're going to have to give them a minute until all of that goes through their veins before they can come back to a place where they even can access the rational part or access consciousness. So it's all just very interesting, because essentially conscious versus unconscious is just my perceived reality versus reality, or the truth that none of us can agree on, so we could never prove. So the truth is this unknown, right? Since we couldn't ever prove it. So it's this unknown. So we're having to essentially trust in this unknown, the magic that we all feel. Some people call it God, some people call it presence. But we know it's the same thing we're accessing, but it's this kind of unknown to our logical mind. And we're having to have trust or faith in that over all the logic. And it's hard, because everything in your logical mind would tell you that you've acquired all of this knowledge and you have a better vantage point or perspective and you know what's right and wrong and you're headed the right way. And it's really hard to want to lay all of that down, lay down this identity and all of the knowledge we've filled ourselves with to make ourselves more powerful or bigger or less likely to die. But when you do, when you just in that moment override that fear-based voice for the unknown, having faith that this action alone gives you access to all of that unknown, the eternal, infinite parts of us that we don't understand because they're not understandable. But that doesn't mean they should be diminished, as they really should be the forefront. We should make a conscious, dedicated, devoted effort to make every single breath, every single moment, bringing a little more of that joy into this moment. You know, again, depending on what you think's going on here, I think some people think like you enjoy something because that thing has something you want and you're getting it from that. But that's just an attachment. You're giving away your power to the thing. It's you that gets to bring the joy. You can bring the joy into any moment and therefore enjoy anything. And yes, it's a lot easier when your basic needs are met. But maybe that's because once you have made sure your basic needs are met, the hero gets activated or called to duty, and now instead of trying to fight his own fight of making everybody else wrong so he can be right, to fill himself up with that righteousness that his ego needs, maybe we can choose to just lay down the fight. Take another deep breath and relax your shoulders and see if your mind is still open. I lost my train of thought. I had one more thing to say. So maybe instead of being our hero's journey getting conflated here and thinking that we need to be the deciders of who is right or wrong or who deserves to be punished, maybe we can access that part of us that is divine. Because essentially when your hero's journey gets conflated, it's trying to play God or defy God. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. Disregard that word. It just means you're trying to defy reality. You're trying to be the one that gets to decide who shall be damned or who shall be crucified or who shall be redeemed. You think you're going to put this all back together by judging all of the pieces and putting them back in the place your mind or your knowledge would have them be, instead of coming into that moment of realizing that everything is perfect as it is. Shakespeare knew it. Eckhart reminds us all the time, there is no good or bad. Only thinking makes it so. So the part of us that gets confused and wants to play God is because we are divine. And in this moment, if you can choose to give that forgiveness and grace, that's the way in which you get to be divine. In that space where there's only one of us, we are one mind. And instead of making them wrong so you can be right, in this moment, you're offering up that redemption. And in doing so, now you know that it is, that it's available to you, that it's what you are. And every single time you do it, you will be so glad you did it. And the more times you show up and give that love, the bigger it gets. And then you start to realize that you don't need anybody else's love, that you are the one filling yourself with love. And you thought you were needing their love, but giving it is what makes you realize that it's what you are. And then you find this unshakable peace, because you don't need people, places, or things to show up a certain way to fill you up, because you know that only you can fill you up, and that you get to decide how you feel, what you believe, and therefore what you will experience here. So just remember, every single breath is a new opportunity to let go. Let go of the past. Let go of all these ideas you have that are trying to define you. And realize that you are something that could never be defined by a word or a concept. And play a little more in the realm of the unknown, as that is a lot closer to what you really are. The part of you that won't just return to dust soon. And allow that part of you to come into this dimension. So essentially we're going inward. Instead of this idea that we're going to go out and fix the world, like it's might be really well intended, but if you're still conflicted, you can go out with the best intentions and do all the work, but if you're listening to lizard brain, then everything that you do is born of fear or creating more chaos. So if you have to spend 2 hours a morning or whatever it is to make sure you're in that place of presence and love before you leave the house, I would suggest doing that. And a lot of people might say, I don't have the privilege or luxury of doing that. That's just another trap or excuse. Yes, some people might have it a lot easier, but that might be because of things we don't understand, since we don't understand any of it. But all we can do is work with what we've got right here in this moment, right now. Can you make 5 minutes a day to find this peace? Can you make it a priority? You know, you might have a whole list of things to do today, but at the top of the list, can you realize that the most important thing, even if you have a bunch of really important things to do, the most important thing is that you do them all from this place of love. Otherwise, you're just creating more stuff that's going to need to be fixed, like the world. So if you can make it your priority, like, can I stay in this place of peace while I, first thing on the list is clean the house. So let's see if I can clean the house while I stay in this place. Doing pretty good, doing pretty good. Oh, got triggered. Now I'm a little mad or sad and I want to start judging somebody or tossing bad energy. Sit down, take a deep breath, come back to this moment. Maybe you have to do it 5 times. Maybe you can't get the house clean today because you can't stay in that space and you really want to be dedicated and devoted today to make this your priority. Maybe today's not the day. Maybe you have too many important things to do and you can't seem to stay in that space, but you have to get the things done anyways. It'll happen. But if you can start to notice that more than just like a 5-minute meditation or the 5-minute Shavasana after yoga class, that this place of connection and presence is where we need to remain to create peace here. If you can put it at the top of your priority list instead of always thinking like, oh, after I do the dishes, after I get the house, the car, the money, then I'll be able to. Oh, if I had what they had, then I'd be able to. No, people have access to this place of peace or the kingdom of heaven in the worst of scenarios ever. In prison, in wartime, it's available to all of us in every single moment. That's the beauty of the whole thing. It's not about privilege or class or race or any of that. That is the place where that doesn't exist. We are all equal. And if we can start to bring that into this dimension, the only way we can act as though we believe that all men are created equal is to not think that we are right and they are wrong. To realize that they have a unique piece of the puzzle, that even if you can't quite see what they're talking about because you're on the opposite end of things, that you can appreciate it. You know, I have liberal friends that are like, say things like, oh, everybody in the whole middle of the country is just, they think they're just a bunch of idiots, you know, and just worshiping Jesus and having all these kids. And it's like, they're also growing all of our food. And they're the ones, you know, kind of trying to hold some of the wholesome values together. Not saying they're right. They're probably racist and a lot of other things. But they are just doing a thing that, like, I sure as hell don't want to do. So, like, I'm very appreciative that those people want to do that. And the more I can just appreciate the opposition instead of trying to get anybody to see things my way, the more I find this peace, and I feel this balance of our energies, like one not trying to dominate the other, but trying to find this really nice actual equity of seeing that everybody else is just like you and that we all want to reduce suffering. We just have really different ideas about it. So if somebody comes at you and they have this idea that sounds to you like it would be dangerous and, you know, it makes you feel that fear-based thing and you want to attack them because you feel like you're fighting the good fight and what they're going to do is dangerous. If you can just realize that they have reasons for thinking the way they do. They've seen very different things. And nothing is ever completely black and white. You cannot know that they are wrong and you are right. And if you just appreciate that they're a human being and that not just like let it go what they say, but realize that they have something to teach you or some piece of the puzzle still to come back to this wholeness. And you don't have to be able to understand it in the moment, but you do have to be respectful and kind and stay in this moment. And if you're winning your battle, see if you can help them win theirs too. Not by telling them what's right. I know that feels logically like how you would help them win their battle. Tell them how to not make this happen again. But in this moment, what they need is love, grace, forgiveness. So give them away that you may know that they're yours so we can all be redeemed. Otherwise, we're always just fear-based from the thought of that same merciless judge coming for us at some point, the same one that has had us judge against everything we have seen. But when we offer it up, then maybe next time we need it, it's there for us. And we'll fall from grace over and over and over. And we'll forget. and we'll get possessed by the reptilian voice when we get triggered, some trauma from the past, or just a certain sound brings us into that space. And those are the moments where you really hope that you have surrounded yourself with people, places, and things that are willing to help you back up, instead of go, you're wrong, you're bad, and want to point fingers and are ready to fight. All right. Thanks for listening. I know this was long. Let's lay down the fight. One more thing I wanted to add for those of you that need it to pencil out. The reason taking this deep breath does so much is because the little reptilian voice will breathe for you. You don't have to worry about it. He'll keep you alive because he wouldn't want you to die, right? So he'll keep these shallow breaths coming until your heart stops, right? But just by choosing to be conscious for this breath, to make it a little deeper, because you can, because we're, I think, the only species that can, in fact, decide to take this deeper breath to come to this place of peace, just by choosing to not let the breath be this automated response or this programmed fear of death mechanism that is all that rules us, unless we choose. You choose in this moment to consciously participate in this breath by making it a little bigger. You're choosing now to show up. You're choosing to be conscious just by being conscious of your breath. So that's why it's such an easy life hack, because we can just go through life on autopilot and just be a combination of everything we've ever seen and done, or our mom and dad and all the things that our knowledge would tell us. But in this moment, if you choose to be here now, you will choose to take a deeper breath, because that sends a message to every cell in your body that there's not a tiger chasing you, because you wouldn't be able to do that if there in fact was. So you're sending this message deeper than words could ever penetrate, that you don't need those resources reallocated. You don't need the adrenaline spike. You're saying, I got this. I'm residing in the part of me that isn't afraid of death, that will be like the tree in the forest and just enjoy the ride. And some people want to call it spiritual bypassing, but they just don't understand that that's how you transcend the fear, is by letting go of these attachments, so that nothing has the power to steal your peace. We don't give away our power and let it steal our peace and then say we're oppressed. We realize we're the only one that can essentially oppress us by allowing that fear voice to be your ruler. When really, if you think about it, that fear, that reptile voice, his master is death. That's the only thing he's concerned about. And yeah, he doesn't want you to die, but what he's holding on the pedestal above all else is death. So that's his master. Whereas the other one could be said is life. And it might look like a contradiction, because everything here in duality does, because essentially what it's saying is that life is so much more than just this body. And when this body stops, when your heart stops beating, maybe that's when life begins. We don't know. But just choosing to be here for this breath, this moment will never happen again. Can you infuse it with a little bit more joy? If so, you can enjoy anything. And yes, that doesn't mean that you should endure terrible things. You know, you'll find ways to create privilege, or, you know, the things that will help you to find that place more. If you stop looking outward and pointing fingers and blaming other people for the situation that you're in, then you get to lean into the unknown, and that's where all of our real power is. Okay, it's getting too windy. Thanks for listening. Okay, last thought, I promise. Obviously, one could oppress another, and just like anything, everything can be contradictory. But no matter what situation you find yourself in, you still have access to this inner peace. I know it might be hard to believe that if horrible things are happening to you, that you could access that, but that's what we're working towards. Maybe it's not accessible to us now. Maybe it won't be in this lifetime or ever, but that's what we're working towards, is that no matter what we are enduring, that we still know that we are more than this body, and that we can, in fact, transcend that fear. So yes, one could oppress another, and that's what we're working towards by trying to stop the fight and stop pointing fingers and blaming and assuming that because there happens to be an oppressor and an oppressed, that one person is wrong or evil. They're looking through a different lens, and to them they might be giving somebody an opportunity and not realizing the big picture, that they're really holding them at the bottom. But everything here could be argued and could be blown holes through it if that's what your mind is trying to do, is trying to make everybody wrong so that you get to be right. But that's not what this is about, right? This is about laying down the fight and realizing that everything that's true or right in your mind is equally false or wrong in somebody else's mind. And neither one of you are closer to the truth. You might just be on opposite ends of this thing. And we need both of you, both energies, to keep this balance. We need everybody's unique individual perspective to be whole again. So we have to allow all the parts of ourselves that we would have judged against to keep separate, to guarantee our incompletion, back in by way of our forgiveness and our grace, that we can be redeemed or saved. Okay, I lied. Last piece. It's getting windy, and I know this whole thing has probably been noisy wind in the background, and it's 5 pieces now. I don't even know if you can put these together, but I'll figure it out. The last piece is that I know that it probably sounds like I'm doing exactly what I'm saying is the problem, and saying that I'm right and anybody else is wrong. And I honor your perspective if that's what you see. My perspective is that I am sharing my truth. I have no idea if it will be helpful to anybody else, even though I know that that place that we access, whatever we call it, is the same. We've all set up our own paradigms, given value to all the words and people and places and things in it. So we look at it and talk about it and essentially think about it differently. And I'm not in any way saying that my perspective is closer to the truth than anybody else's. I'm just thinking that maybe I, just like I believe that all of you, have a unique piece of the puzzle, and that if I can learn to tell my inner critic to shut up and tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't say all of this, because essentially I'm just doing the same thing and falling into my own trap of thinking that I'm right and anybody else is wrong. What I'm really trying to do is tap into that place where there is equality. We want to act it out in the flesh, and there it doesn't exist. But in this place of seeing that all men are created equal, and knowing that everybody has a piece of the puzzle, and that sometimes you're going to completely disagree with what somebody says, but just asking to look at it as they're not wrong. They're just over there on the other side, where we're looking through the opposite side. Everything is completely backwards and therefore opposite. Every force has an equal and opposite reaction in this reality. And so if you think that I am just telling you that I am right, or that you should come more to my side, I apologize for that, because that's exactly what I'm trying to lay down. And I've been fighting with this and going, I'm not going to share any of this because I'm just doing the same thing. And maybe anytime we talk, we're just doing that same thing. And maybe all the masters were right when they just say the only knowledge is inward and going inward. And anytime we move away from that, going inward, and talk and point outwardly, that we're moving away from the truth. Maybe that's real, and maybe we're all just arguing about semantics, essentially, because we just all speak slightly different languages. I don't know. But I just want to share my truth. And at the same time, I know that my truth, or my perceived reality, is what is keeping me from seeing the truth. And so I'm always trying to find this balance of knowing that, of course, my own inner knowledge informing my outer journey, my hero's journey, is going to be the best possible voice I could listen to, because I believe that's how this is set up. I'm always going to stay open, or try to stay open to realizing that if I can incorporate all of the other perspectives as well, by not judging against them, that I will gain a clearer and clearer perspective. I'm still not totally convinced that our perspective can be crystal clear. I mean, I suppose enlightenment, that's what that is, and that you've crystallized the mind or purified the mind. And at that point, it seems as though you don't care about anything anymore. And I don't want to go that far. I don't want to zoom that far out. I still want to be really actively involved and participate in this reality. And I'm just trying to find this balance of really listening to my truth, but being completely aware that it is my truth, or my perceived reality, that is blocking me from seeing the truth. Or unconsciousness versus consciousness, because no matter how conscious I might think that I am, or I'm trying to be, I'm still a human, and therefore subject to that that voice that is just unconscious. And in that way, you could look at it as just life and death. Essentially, that master that the lizard serves is death, and the other one is life. And it might look the opposite, since the lizard doesn't want you to die, and the truth doesn't care if you die, because there is no dying. There's just this whatever it is we're experiencing here. But essentially, I've been thinking about it like that. It's like, do you want to honor life or death? Do you want to worship death by just making sure everything you do doesn't cause you to die? To some degree, yeah, because we do want to enjoy this experience, right? And so that's not wrong, it's not bad, it's just put in its right place so that it's appropriate, right? Listening to that voice when it's appropriate, overriding when you can, when you should, when you don't need that little helper. Okay, that's the end. I hope that somebody liked this somewhere, and I hope that you will choose to lay down the fight when you can and just take that deep breath. Choose to consciously participate in this breath right now. Infuse it with a little more joy and see if we can spread a little bit more of that. Okay, last thing I'm going to say on this. I promise. Okay, so I do believe that spiritual bypassing can be a thing. At first I hear it and I'm just like, oh, just like toxic positivity. And that's one that makes me cringe and just go, oh, it's because anything that's true is equally false. So even positivity, and I get it. And I do understand the idea of toxic positivity, and it's being on that flip side, the side of having hope or whatever it is. And it's no better than the other side. But spiritual bypassing, in my perspective, my limited scope perspective, is when we say, I'm just going to ignore that suffering over there and find my place of peace. I can't be bothered by the suffering of the world. To me, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm saying, let me find my peace, that I can go be of service to help with the suffering of the world from a place of love, instead of me bringing my own inner conflict with me and pointing fingers at everybody and blaming and projecting my guilt and shame onto everybody else. Let me find that place of peace so I can have this unshakable peace that I can bring with me, so that I can be of service, so that I can see what's happening without being triggered and constantly being in a place where I'm taking all of my own stuff out on everybody else. So in that regard, I believe that when we try to find the peace first, that it's like, in this regard, do I feel like time is an illusion? Because I think we would think like, well, once I go out there and fix the world and there's not so much suffering, then I'll have peace. But I feel like that's the trap, is thinking about time in that way. Is thinking that the only way we can actually help the world is to find that inner peace and be the change we want to see in the world. Be the inner peace that we want to see out there, instead of trying to fix out there and thinking that's going to fix in here. For me, when I find that peace in here, then I'm able to go and help out there. Okay, no more pieces, no matter, even if something comes to me, that's the end.